Login accepted.
Wow, what an introduction. Okay. Wow, it's so shiny here. Like I cannot even see you. Like you'll need to shout to me when I'll be asking questions. Okay, give us a sec and we'll start. The people are still gathering, so let's wait a sec. Okay, so far, how do you enjoy the conference? Like, have you found any topic interesting to your area? I hope that this presentation will be interesting as well. There were a lot of interesting presentations so far, so I hope that this one will be interesting as well. Welcome to the presentation entitled How Organizational Structure Affects Software Conway's Law in Practice. I'm extremely happy to be here in person for a change for the last 2 years. And this is my first time in Devoxx, so I'm double happy because of that. In this presentation, I'd like to show you how organizational structure, so different teams, departments, but also communication lines, goals, incentives, affects the result of the organization. So in our terminology, computer systems in terms of architecture, designs, but also speed of delivery, number of bugs, and how quickly we solve them. Or, in more concrete example, why Microsoft, after a quite successful system of Windows XP, ended up with Microsoft Vista, a very faulty system that caused a massive headache to its clients for at least 1 year until Microsoft finally stabilized it. But first, a few words about me. My name is Radek Maziarka. I work as a solution architect and engineering manager for Polish product companies and software houses. I specialize in domain-driven design as techniques and product development approaches to deliver long-living digital products. I originate from .NET, so Azure is my first cloud of choice. And this is really a change for me to be here on the conference and listen to so many great Java speakers to learn from this community. This whole presentation with other materials is available on my website at radekmaziarka.pl, Conway's Law in Practice. If you would be interested in the materials which I based my presentation on, you can check this link. This link will be posted in my social media, so I strongly encourage to follow me on Twitter. I've already scheduled the post about this presentation to my Twitter account. Okay, these are the formalities. Let's go back to Conway's Law and let's go back to Microsoft Windows Vista. Okay, you could say that Microsoft is Microsoft and it just delivers faulty, crappy systems, but it's not particularly true. Yeah, the Windows XP was good as well as 7 and 10. On top of it, they have pretty successful cloud. Microsoft Azure. Yeah? So what happened here that situation ended up with such a system? 3 researchers were eager to look for answer. Two researchers from Microsoft Research, a research subsidiary of Microsoft, and a professor from University of Maryland were curious about interesting hypothesis. They wanted to check. They wanted to prove, or disprove, that you can predict the result of the organization based on its structure. In this particular case of Microsoft Vista, the number of errors, yeah, and the location of these errors. They gathered a lot of data to analyze this hypothesis. From the organizational perspective, they had a lot of data. To construct this hypothesis, they got the information about the teams, a few thousand people like divided into different teams, and they got information about the whole organizational structure, so the whole corporate ladder. And they got also information about the people, about the number of people working on a particular code, so where they made their changes. From the result perspective, they had the broad data as well. The whole source code, more than 50 million lines of code, and more than 3,000 binaries, which you can call modules or jars in your programming language. And they got information about errors, a lot of errors, but also when these errors occurred and where, particularly in which binary. So do you think there was some kind of connection between these two areas? I think that the results amazed even the researchers themselves. It turned out that with 85% precision, you could predict the binary that will contain an error based on the organizational structure. Researchers proved a lot of interesting connection between these two areas. First, that the more people involved in changing the code, the lower the code stability was. When everybody wants to change a particular code, it very easily leads to broken contracts, broken APIs, changes like dynamic changes in the structure. Then, the more people engage from the corporate ladder, the slower the design process was. When we can apply a change inside of the team, we can do it almost immediately. When we need to engage people from the corporate ladder, our managers or his or her superior, it takes a lot because they need to understand our situation, get to know our context. Then, like the third interesting connection was that the more distributed this responsibility we have in a structure, the higher code complexity was. So when there are multiple teams working on a single code, we have different needs behind these teams. So these teams automatically will put their needs in this code, and it ends up with more complex structure, more complex code, difficult patterns, because we need to embrace all these needs in our code. And last but not least, the more people outside the team was engaged in a code, the lower the code quality was. It's a typical tragedy of the commons. When people outside of the team reaches particular code, they do not think about the reasons behind this code. They only want to apply their changes to follow their schedules, pursue their goals. In this way, nobody takes care of the code itself, and the code quality lowers incredibly fast. These are the top of the connection that the researchers found in the research found between the corporate structure of Microsoft and the result of Microsoft Vista. And knowing all this, you could think that these results are pretty obvious, right? You could even feel that these things on the left will end up with these problems on the right. And that's even more important here, because in order to focus on the problems in code, you shouldn't only focus on the code itself. Code coverage, churn, dependencies, complexity, they weren't the most important aspects leading to the errors in the structure in the software system. The organizational structure was the best indicator of the bug occurrences. If you have followed the structure of the organization, you could spot the error in the easiest way. No other factors, like the code structure, the architectural structures, no other factors were so successful in this matter. The authors of the research wanted to prove the validity of the Conway's law. It says that organizations which design systems in a broad sense used here, so not only computer systems, are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. It was defined by Mel Conway in 1967 in a research paper, How Do Communities Invent? What is really interesting is Mel Conway is still alive and is still active on Twitter. You can ask him about the Conway's law and he will respond to you in a very quick manner. The law says that the organization will naturally create its results based on the communication lines inside of the company. So how the company works under the surface mirrors the result that this company is working on. This is a pretty abstract way of defining a law. So this law is usually described as a company who builds a compiler and ends up with a 4-step compiler. Let's assume that we want to build a compiler and we have a group of people. We divide them into 4 different teams. They cooperate each other to build this compiler, but they are working on a daily basis in their own teams. And then cooperation within the team is much easier than cooperation outside of the team. We are following our own schedules, and we are not taking into account so deeply other schedules. Yeah, we are focusing on our changes in code, and then it turns out that it breaks somebody else's code. At some point, this kind of working will end up with a massive problem, and it will lead to settling up a work contract. Yes, so we will try to work in a more modular way. We will try to expose some APIs to be used by different teams, and based on these APIs, we'll be free from be bothered from outside teams. And because of that, because of this modular approach that we'll apply at some point, we will end up with a 4-step compiler. The communicational structure will be mirrored in our compiler. And exactly this thing happened with Microsoft and Windows Vista. The managers, the C-level, didn't take into account how they should approach the problem of creating a software system, operational system. And unfortunately, it ended up like that inappropriate structure in terms of this problem created faulty operational system. There is another interesting research paper worth mentioning here from the Harvard Business School research paper. The authors proved that the organizational structure in terms of closed and open source organization can predict its architecture of the system that this company is working on. When we have an open source company, we work in a more loosely coupled way. There is no single goal here. The goals are more diverse. The same applies to authority. It's more informal, and the work is more independent. It leads to more loosely coupled solution, which is more modular, and there are multiple different libraries to connect to. On the contrary, typical companies are more formal. Yeah, there is the formal line of command, who is superior to whom. Usually there is well-defined goal, and we work towards achieving these goals. And plans are made centrally. And it is copied into the software. The software is more tightly coupled with a top-down structure. Knowing all that, let me ask you a question. Let's assume that we want to build a system. It doesn't matter which system it is. We divide our our employees into 3 different teams: UI specialists, backend developers, and database administrators. They work together to deliver the system, but they work in a separate way. They synchronize, for example, like every 2 weeks in a sprint planning or something like that. But besides that, they have their own schedules, they have their own backlogs, and they try to work as separate as they can. What will be the result of this structure? Yeah? Like in terms of architecture, delivery time, bug fix. What do you think? Excuse me? Yes, definitely. You can expect that it will result in with de facto 3 different systems. There will be strong focus on a technical aspect of the software without concerning so much the business side. There will be the newest framework used in any layer, but usually without any business reasons behind it. Teams will have different separate repositories, and they will gatekeep the changes from the other teams. Features between the areas will be delivered very slowly. Even the bug fixing will be slower here, very slowly here, will be very slow here. Yeah, very slow here because of the fact that we need to synchronize 3 different backlogs to deliver a single goal. And teams will very easily throw the blame over the fence. Yeah? It's not our problem. Yeah? It's the database administrator problem because they haven't thought of the indexes, yeah, to our database structure. Yeah, there will be putting the blame on somebody else. Let's assume a different situation. Let's assume that we work in the company that have a sales department. And sales department is rewarded for every project or feature sold. They don't need permission to sell a feature. They will just transform a client request into an internal request to delivery. It doesn't matter to them how this feature or project aligns to the overall architecture of our system. What will be the result? What will be the system at the end after a few years of working like that? Who worked in a situation like that? Yeah, I see a couple of hands. Yeah, how it ends? Huh? Yes, like the result usually looks like that. Yeah. I've cooperated with a number of different companies, and it always looks the same. Multiple contradictory features or projects ends up with a massive legacy code, overdue delivery, and the people leaving the software team. When we have a structure, when we have an incentive systems that rewards working on their own and not cooperating, the results can't be greater than this. And of course, it goes even further. Yeah? When you have such a structure, yeah, when there are multiple different teams working on their own, they will usually fight for their own positions. The work will take ages. Yeah? Cooperation across the teams will not exist. And everybody will blame others for the lack of cooperation. Yeah, like it was operational team's problem. Yeah, because they haven't delivered it on schedule. Yeah, like the typical situation here. In this way, we will very easily it will very easily result in a silo structure. Yeah? When we do not cooperate with each other, but we compete with them. Yeah? And unfortunately, corporation usually ends up with such a situation. Yeah, when there is some wall, there is crocodile swimming there. Like this is the typical corporate situation. But unfortunately, this is not the case that is applied only to big companies. I've been looking into this matter. I've been looking into Conway's law because of the situation that happened in my own project. We were working for a British client to deliver a system. There were multiple different teams from both countries. And we also have different product managers, also from both countries. We were working together to deliver this system. I must say that cooperation was going pretty smoothly there. Unfortunately, at some point, of course, we had to cross a major problem. It turned out that at the beginning of the project, nobody thought of migrating the data from the old system. Yeah, like, let's build a new system, but why should we bother about migrating data from the old system? Yeah? So after a few months of project being delivered, we had to cooperate with external database administrator to finalize, to work on this migration. And it became extremely problematic. This DBA was outside of our project structure. And he wasn't interested in achieving our goals. He only wanted to perform a minimum of work to then focus on his own goals. At some point, he started to sabotage any changes in the database. He required to be informed about changes in the database at least 2 weeks before starting work to be able to veto the changes. He forbade changing the existing database structure. The new database approaches were rejected by him. Like the working on the system in terms of database started to become a nightmare. At some point, our lack of cooperation was escalated to project manager's level. We had to inform external project manager about any changes in our database. Yeah? Could you guess how it affected our system? Like, what was the architecture of our system? How we felt about it? We ended up with such an architecture. We had like our platform. Yeah, we felt that it was ours. We could make any required changes in this platform, and it was pretty straightforward. Unfortunately, we had external database. We didn't feel like it was ours. Like, any changes inside of this database took ages. And to be honest, it's hard to blame the DBA for that. Like, he got his own schedules, his own roadmap to follow. While he was helping us, at the same time he was sacrificing his own goals. Structure of the whole cooperation was badly designed. Instead of helping us cooperate, it made us compete. And this is what a faulty structure does. It's worth mentioning Edward Deming here, who was a consultant management and one of the founder of the Japanese industrial success after the Second War. A bad system will beat a good person every time. We can try to overcome problems with structure, but at some point it will just beat us. And there are multiple reasons behind it. First, the first factor to mention here is that the time to finish a task increases geometrically when the task leaves a team. When the task leaves a team, it's being taken by a different team, which has a different schedule, a different goals, and they don't care about our schedules. Yeah, they want to follow their own schedules, and it leads to delays in our teams and many different complications. We may not get the work done on time. Then the communication is hindered. When you have an inappropriate structure, approval of our decision needs to go through multiple layers of the corporate structure. Then it reaches the people who knows nothing about our context. They will analyze this decision based on their context, based on their needs, yeah? not focusing on our situation here. In the multiple situation, it will result with a rejection of the decision. Yeah? After a few weeks, after a few months, we'll need to start from scratch. Another issue is related to rules, procedures, policies. Different teams will build different types of rules for their own needs. They will help them feel secure, gatekeeping any changes. And these rules are usually not adjusted to our situation. Sometimes even these rules can be contradictory to one another. They will constrain you from doing your work. You will feel stuck like a fly in a spider's web, like not being able to move in any direction. But the worst scenario is when a structure forces us to work towards a separate goals. When a win in one department leads to a loss in another one. In such a structure, nobody will help us with our problems, with our tasks. When people lose their bonuses because of helping us, nobody will be willing to do so. And unfortunately, the situation with goals is that it starts slowly, yeah? But at some point, after a few months, after a few years, we end up in a very hostile environment. The management usually responds to these problems in a typical manner. Why don't we communicate better? Yeah? Why we can't work closer together? Maybe some workshop is needed. Yeah, let's organize some workshop. Or let's hire an agile coach to help us with our work. Yeah? Do you think it's gonna help us? Yeah, like to some extent, maybe. But unfortunately, we can't overcome the problems with the structure because of our own constraints. The way we think, the way we cooperate, the way we work is constrained by our own psychology. Yeah? We cannot overcome who we are. We are limited by our own personality traits. Like working against these traits is like trying to fight a law of gravity. Yeah, like how? Like you can't. Yeah. So why does it happen? First of all, we cannot communicate effectively in larger groups. As you can see, the number of connections increases geometrically. To lower the number of communication lines, we usually divide people into different teams. But it leads to perceiving this group of people as a single entity. We don't treat them as individual people, we treat them as a group as a whole. And it's because of the cognitive load. Our memory is finite. Yeah? We cannot store too much information there. While working inside the team, we are naturally exposed to all the information, to all the work goals of this team. So these informations are stored much easier in our memory. But at the same time, we are not working so closely with other teams. And we will very easily end up with forgetting about their goals, their schedules. Yeah, we will focus on our own work. And it will very easily result in tribalism. This is the border between Mexico and US. And borders naturally separate us. We will think about differences in our culture, in our work style, in our ways of approaching problems. There is no us now, there is us and them, yeah, somebody else. On the top of that, there are multiple cognitive biases that will strengthen this behavior. Two of them that are worth mentioning here are stereotyping and collective narcissism. Yeah, like stereotyping and collective narcissism. Like stereotyping leads to a situation when we do not seek to understand the other roles, but we categorize them in negative traits. Yeah? Developers, what will developers say about project managers? They'll always change the requirements at the end of delivery. Yeah, like typical way of perceiving project managers. And what will say project managers about developers? Yeah, like it's much tougher. Like developers will always introduce bugs and they are not reliable. Yeah, we can't rely on them. We need to micromanage them. Yeah, like this is the way of thinking. Yeah, and with this kind of thinking, it's really hard to build collaborative atmosphere in our organization. Then a common problem is a collective narcissism. We tend to exaggerate while thinking about, we exaggerate in positive thinking about our team, and we do not seek to have the same positive attitude towards different team. It's much harder to think of ourselves as these bad guys here. Yeah, we are naturally to try to push the problem outside of our teams. Yeah, like it's much easier to work and to live to proceed this way. Taking all this into account, yeah, these problems, these cognitive biases, this whole psychology behind it, you may come to the conclusion that doomed we are. Yeah, like there is no option to avoid these problems. The only option here is to run away from them. Yeah? So what do? We build some solution, then the problems occur, and then we leave somewhere else to build a new system, yeah, the new greenfield. And then the problems occur once again, and we leave, and the cycle begins. Yeah, like unfortunately such things happen. But fortunately, there is a way here, there is a solution here, and it's called inverted Conway maneuver. Yeah, it was defined, this term was coined by Johnny Leroy, a consultant from ThoughtWorks. Inverted Conway maneuvers recommend evolving your team and organizational structure to promote your desired architecture. So instead of working against the structure, we should align the structure to the problem, understand the goals that we want to achieve, and adapt and align our structures accordingly. Only then the structure will promote the desired behavior in our organization. Let us look on a different example of how it could look like. The most popular example of inverted Conway maneuver is a cross-functional team. Cross-functional teams include different roles inside of one team to promote working on a single goal and achieving them as a whole. When different roles are part of a single team, it's much easier to cooperate to deliver a single functionality instead of working across 3 different teams. Another example, which is very popular these days, is DevOps. DevOps practices combines different capabilities of developers and operational teams. We want to have mutual responsibility of delivering the work to the production. We don't want to throw the work over the fence. Limiting these constraints will result in lower number of communication lines, and we'll have a common. We'll have no division between these teams in terms of delivery to production. Yeah? So in this kind of way, there are no separate roles, separate tasks of delivering the work to the production. It's a mutual responsibility. Also, a lot was said about invented Conway maneuver and microservices. Yeah? So when we want to have an autonomous microservice, so autonomous part of a system, we should have autonomous team working on this microservice. Only then we can ensure that this microservice will have a single responsibility. A dedicated team will work towards a particular goal to embrace all these changes, all these responsibilities in a single microservice. But on a multiple occasion, you may come across a problem of how to deliver something that will be used by the whole system, by the 4 different teams. Yeah? Should we add then a ticket to 4 different backlogs? No. We can approach the problem from the different perspective. There is a way that was described by Nick Tune in his article Strategic Alliance Team. The Strategic Alliance Team is the Strategic Alliance Team is the pattern when we get the people from different teams to be a part of a single team. Their goal is to work on a single particular element, single particular library in this case, or some shared options. But at the same time, they were the part of a single team. So they understand the overall goals of the whole company. After achieving this goal, the team can be disassembled to its previous structure. But this goal of achieving a single library will be achieved by a single team. So there is no shared responsibility here. These examples were, like, let's say, pretty basic. Yeah? But we can think bigger here. Let's discuss more fundamental properties of invented Conway maneuver and understand how we can even further adapt our structures to the desired results. All 4 examples that I've discussed already are based on the approach called outcome-oriented teams. This idea was described by Sriyam Narayan in his book Agile IT Organizations. We want to build a teams that will be focused on delivering single business outcome. This requires a real collaboration inside of a team to pursue this goal. But because of that, we will have fewer communication lines between different teams and lower and higher flexibility to pursue this goal. Yeah? When the task is not leaving a team, it's much easier to restructure ourselves to deliver this goal. This way of working is related to the DevOps team and can be broadened to all ops approach. I don't know whether you have heard of it, but probably you have heard of these different buzzwords. Yeah, like DevSecOps, BizDevOps, FinOps. Yeah, these are all examples of outcome-oriented teams. In this case, we want to build a single automation in a different areas, like security automation, like business automation, or financial one. If we want to embrace different aspects of creating software, we must create structures that will enhance our cooperation and lead to adding this information from different roles into our software. You might be wondering right now, wouldn't it increase the number of people inside of the team to a ridiculous level? Yes, like, I don't know, 15, 20 people in a single team. No, but you need to approach this problem from a different angle. There is a book which was already mentioned in this conference called Team Topologies by Matthew Sculton and Manuel Pes. In this book, authors describes 4 different types of teams and 3 different interaction modes between them. Based on this knowledge, we can structure our company, our organization toward achieving a single goal, but in a different way. An interesting way of cooperating that is usually omitted by companies is called facilitating. A team of experts joins the team to help them increase the knowledge in a particular area and work on a particular task. When these experts see that the team is competent and work is close to be done, they leave the team to join another one. All these structure, all these interaction modes requires a proper cooperation between the whole structure. And this level of cooperation can be obtained only if we have the right goal structure. The goals of a single department should correspond to the main goal, should be a part of it. Also, a goal of a single department, yes, should be consistent with the goal of the next department. And very often this is not the case. As I described in the example of sales and the developers departments, the goals of the first department was making the second department weaker. Yeah, the sales department was making the work of software developers more difficult. So, like having this goal structure is probably the most important to have a well-working organization. As you can imagine, applying all this knowledge is a lot of work. Yeah, you can't apply this knowledge overnight. It takes a lot of time, and it needs a lot of time to apply it correctly. But unfortunately, the world doesn't seem to stop. Yeah, we have ever-changing business environment and the need of changing our software. We experience modern problems, and modern problems require modern solutions. Sander Hugendorn, who was also a speaker at this conference, in his presentation, How Micro Teams Change the Way We Collaborate, described the idea of micro teams. Yeah, like, of course. So micro teams start as a collective. Yeah, there are no boundaries. We work together. And then when we experience a particular error, or a particular problem, we form a short-living team to solve a particular problem. In this case, it could be deliver a security functionality, automate AWS marketing, or build financial reporting in Azure. Once the goal is delivered, the structure is disbanded and it works as a collective. The structure is able to adapt very easily to the changing in the business environment, and it can very easily repurpose the way it's working. The problem is that you may find it really like the first thing that could be happening in this area, especially in some big companies, is how we will put it into Jira. Yeah, like how? Or how we will calculate the velocity, how to measure the story points of these teams. Yeah, like how we can do it. Yeah, of course, I am joking right now because this is not a serious question, but right now, there are not so many materials of how we can structure the work in this collective, in this micro teams way. But what is really interesting is that there are currently people working in this way, even in larger corporations. After Sander posted his presentation on LinkedIn, a guy posted his response. Martin Pakulnicki, as the head of IT in NG Bank, wrote that they are currently using this approach in his own structure. Why? Because they can achieve like steady pace of working, yeah, and adapting to a different goals, to a different needs. So, is the micro teams a future of our work? Time will tell. It was a presentation about Conway's law in practice. I wanted to show you on different examples how organizational structure affects our results. And unfortunately, Conway's law acts like work like a gravity force. We cannot adapt to it. Yeah, like it will work even if we don't like it. But the way of working here is to plan your structure accordingly, understand your goals that you want to achieve, and build the structure that will strengthen the desired behaviors. Oh my God, like people are leaving. Why it's not the end? Yeah, like the most, yeah, and they left before the most important takeaway. Yeah. Yeah, so the great that you stayed here. The most important takeaway from this presentation is that the goals must be consistent inside of the organization. Must be consistent horizontally per different teams, per different departments, and vertically to be a part of a greater goal. I like to finish this presentation with a quote from Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft. A few years ago, Microsoft completely changed their structure. Yeah, went through a big restructurization in terms of to adapt to a cloud movement. In the letter to all the employees, Satya wrote, "To truly get the best impact from our efforts, we will have to push ourselves to transcend the Conway's law." So we shouldn't work against the Conway's law, but the new structure must reflect the goals that we want to achieve. And from my perspective, in terms of cloud, it seems to be working. Thank you very much for being here. My presentation and other resources are available at my website, radekmaziarka.pl, Conway's Law in Practice. I encourage you to follow me on Twitter at radekmaziarka, and I am open to answer your questions. Thank you very much.